We are joined by John Kingston. Mr. Kingston, John, thank you for joining us. How are you, sir?
How are you? How are you? Good to see you. Hope you had a good weekend.
Absolutely. So what's going on in your world?
Well, several things that I wrote about the past couple of days of interest. Going back to what you were just saying about the supply chain, I did my podcast interview with a guy named Matt Zabriskie, who is a researcher with a company. I'm forgetting the company's name now. And his specialty, among other things, is pallets. And we did a podcast about the shortage of pallets. So it's every single thing in the supply chain. Even something like the lowly pallet is in tight supply. Well, why? Or it's not only is in tight supply, but the price also has gone up. Why? Well, we know that most pallets are made of lumber. He also said that nails are made of steel. That's in tight supply. And it was really interesting. I recorded him, I think, on Thursday, and I was out in the morning running an errand, and I went past this building that's got a printing facility. It's a small printing plant, and they were out in front, and I'd never seen this before. There was a pile of pallets with a sign for sale. The guy was literally reselling his pallets. That's how crazy the market is. So there's nothing unique about the pallets. It is subject to the same thing, the same conditions that all the other parts of the supply chain are. But it just goes to show you that there really is no place to hide. Every single part of this market is tight.
Yeah, John, I actually spoke about that on Great Quarter Guys last week. It was my chart of the week was the pallet price index from Fred. It's 4x over the past 5 years. It's there's some industry sources saying that the price of pallets has gone up 400% over the past year. And the thing is that we have these retailers and we have brands that are trying to build up some buffer inventory and that are holding on to pallets a little bit longer. We have very tight transportation supply, which makes it very difficult to relocate pallets. So it's just, you're right, it is just one thing after the other that keeps things very tight. What else have you guys been covering?
Well, we also had another set of indictments in the Louisiana scam, staged accident scam. That's the story's been going on for quite a year, some time. And just for a little recap, what would happen was that lawyers would hire people who would stage an accident with a truck. Almost always a truck. There was one that involved a bus, so they would kind of slam into the truck and then they would do a whole dance about how injured they were and looking for a payout. In some cases, the payouts were, $10,000, $20,000. I know of one of the cases, the payout came close to $500,000. So this ring is slowly but surely being busted up. These slamming cases went back to 2017, most of them. And so what you're seeing on the guilty pleas are mostly kind of the low-level people who were in the cars, and they were the ones that were colliding with the trucks. And what's going to happen is that they're all going to flip as part of their guilty pleas, I'm sure, and they're going to testify against the lawyers who staged this. Now, there is one lawyer already who has been indicted, and there are certainly more to come because if you look at the indictments that were handed down against the people who were in the cars, they referred to unidentified co-conspirator lawyer A, B, C, D, yet only one of them has been identified. Another one has been the target of a civil suit by Southeastern Freight. So this is all very much unraveling, and the canaries are all flipping here, and they're speaking. They're all going to go to jail. Nobody's not going to go to jail. These guilty pleas all assume some kind of time in jail, but they're going to lower that time in jail. I'm sure they're going to flip and testify against the attorneys. I mean, let's remember how big a deal this is and how just sort of how corrupt it is. One of the people who was he had either pleaded guilty or was about to plead guilty opened up his door one day in New Orleans and was shot to death. They still have not made an arrest in that case. So you can see how this is not some little minor thing about somebody complaining about a sore shoulder and they like a small payout. This was really big time corruption, and there are certainly more dominoes to fall.
Are there any, is there any fear of some other things like that happening again? Are the people that are coming up and will, eventually testify, are there any fear for their life?
My guess is call them on the or maybe not all these that relaxed these days. So
Yes.
I think you can operate under that assumption. I mean, if one person got it, we can assume that others are going to get it, or at least the thoughts have occurred on the part of some of the conspirators to go after some others. So, as I said, this is big time corruption, and it hits some big companies. trying to think who was. CR England was one of the victims, and one of the other victims was like a one guy trucking company. So the people who were identifying the trucks to hit in the New Orleans and Baton Rouge area, they didn't just go after sort of big name trucking companies. They assumed that all of them had some degree of insurance coverage. Obviously, they have to by law, and so they go after the big ones and the small ones.
So that's another big point, John Kingston, is that it's going across the board, not just the big carriers, but smaller as well, single operations. So this additional 5, does that bring the total up to what, Rui, now 13?
Is that what I wrote? 13? I think it is 13. Yeah. But again, no lawyers here. The lawyers are the ones who put this together. The evidence on them, based on what I saw in the indictments, were pretty extensive, but they were not named in the indictments, not except for the one, a guy named by the name of Danny Keating. But there are other attorneys out there who clearly were involved, and I'm sure their day will come.
That's right. And so, John Kingston, you had another really interesting story, Bank of Montreal, BMO. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I like these BMO numbers. The Bank of Montreal, it's now just known as BMO, but it was the Bank of Montreal. They are one of the biggest lenders to the trucking industry. Several years ago, in 2016, they bought the GE transportation division, which overwhelmingly lent to trucks. So when the BMO earnings come out every quarter, I like to look at them and write up a story about what their write-off rate is. And in the latest numbers, they wrote off about Canadian. Remember, all the figures are in Canadian dollars. Canadian $10 million, which is nothing. I mean, it's not nothing. I shouldn't say that. It's a very small amount compared to where it's been. I think a year ago it was close to over $30 million, Canadian $30 million. I went back several years. The only one I could find lower than Canadian 10 million was Canadian 2 million in, I think, the first quarter of 2016. But that was right after BMO bought that book of business from GE Capital. So you wonder if maybe in the transition, they weren't writing an awful lot. Maybe they were too busy doing integration of operations. But it's just yet another sign of how strong the market is. This is not, let's say, some speculative debt fuel thing. If it was, then you probably see a lot more write-offs. It may be a little early in some cases for write-offs, so you'd think that the bank would increase the number of allowances it has for troubled loans that it doesn't want to write off yet, doesn't feel it's ready to be written off, but which are starting to show some signs of stress. Those numbers are not up either. So I just think these numbers are, they're 4 times a year. They're lagging. They're lagging a market that we at FreightWaves had reported during the quarter as very strong. And I just think it affirms it. I mean, there's no way if you suddenly have weak markets and truck fleets in stress and financial stress, you're going to see that number in what the banks do. The banks are not going to dilly-dally. They will write it off, or at the very least, they will mark these loans as stressed, and they will make allowances for them. And they're not doing that. So I don't know of any other banks that break it out quite so specifically for transportation. That's why I love the BMO numbers. I just think they're a really good indicator of how the health of the industry.
John, there might be, there's kind of another indicator that we can look at here, and it's just when you're talking about strength in the spot market in particular, it's USA Truck, USAK, the company that is very reliant, very heavy into spot rates. You wrote an article about their Q1 recently, too. Their stock has surged over the past few weeks. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was reached out to by Workhound, and Workhound has an app for driver feedback, and they said, look, we've been working with USA Truck, and they've got some really great results on driver retention, that kind of thing. So I had been noticing that USA Truck's really unique among the truckload companies for several months here earlier in the year, was regularly making 52-week highs, and no other truckload companies were doing that. So I said, yeah, let's talk to them. So I had a really good interview, and you've got the name of the person I interviewed, and I'm drawing a blank now. I'm sorry, I should have it in front of me. But the head of retention at USA Truck, and he said they did work with Workhound to work on feedback, but they only put their first formal pay increase through a few weeks ago. I just found this impossible to believe, but they said, look, we've been working on other things to keep our drivers, and they're doing a lot more of people doing shuttles. They go out and then they come right back, and they're home at night. And in the past, their drivers, almost none of them were home at night, maybe occasionally. Now they've got more than 20% of their people home at night, and that's really proving a strong retention. They said their turnover rates are down by 50%. And certainly, I don't even know if Wall Street is aware of that, but they like the story. The OR was down, about 5 percentage points from year on year. Now, granted, most companies had a significant drop in their ORs the last year, but this has been really a really good story right now. The Wall Street likes the stock. It's been up quite a bit. Their numbers are better, and they're saying that they've, I hate to say, cracked the magic nut on retention, but their approach to retention has been a lot more than just let's keep paying our people more money. They've been doing a lot of other things, and it kind of reminded me of what's going on at U.S. Express with the Variant initiative. It's really kind of a truckload company within a truckload company, and they've had to pay more too, but they also talk really a lot about just having a totally different approach toward your drivers. And they also say that their retention is way down. So if we assume that.
Hey, John, I'm so sorry. I have to bring us to an end. But it's very interesting, and I do appreciate that very much. I do want to give you one last moment. Where should people go find more about Drilling Deep and your work?
Best thing to do is just kind of Google Drilling Deep and podcast and John Kingston, and it's all, it's on all the platforms, Apple, et cetera.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kingston.